Chapter 5908. The pain could not be described with words. It came from every part of the body, every cell, every meridian, and even the soul. The pain caused everyone to wail in agony. Green veins popped out on their faces, and they were in agony. Bailey Hongzhuang could no longer continue copying due to the pain. She frowned and her face turned pale. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead, and the cold sweat on her back soaked her clothes in a short period of time. The pain was even more excruciating than when she was cleansed. Even the sudden pressure from before did not make her feel so devastated. After going through the Thunder Lake and other body-tempering cultivation, she always thought that her pain tolerance was very high. However, after enduring the pain at this moment, she realized that her tolerance was not enough. How did this happen? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. The situation in the Darkness Shrine was too strange. From the moment they entered this place, there were no signs at all. They simply did not know what to do. What did the sudden pain mean? They were at a loss, helpless, and had no answer. All they could do was passively endure everything. The intense pain caused some of the cultivators to roll on the ground. Their wails and screams were mixed together. The entire shrine seemed to have turned into a purgatory on earth, filled with pain and despair. No, I can't take it anymore. I want to leave this place. Under such inhumane torture, many cultivators were on the verge of collapsing. The feeling was no different from begging for death. A cultivator looked out of the door with bloodshot eyes and struggled to move towards the door. He could not take it anymore. If he continued to stay here, he would definitely die from the pain. Speaking of which, after the inexplicable pain, the pressure had decreased significantly. Hence, the man did not slow down as he crawled away. Gradually he got closer to the gate. "Sule, you can't go out. It might be dangerous." Another cultivator shouted loudly. His anxious voice was filled with worry. However, Sule did not care about all this. "I'll die from the pain if I stay here. Instead of dying here, I might as well go out and die." In the next moment, Sule crawled out of the door without hesitation. Everyone's eyes were focused on Sule. They only wanted to know if he could successfully leave. After all, no one wanted to lose their lives like this. Even though it was extremely painful, they would rather continue to struggle than die. After Sule exited the Darkness Shrine, he realized that the pain on his body had disappeared instantly. He felt relaxed. A surprised smile bloomed on his face. Sule excitedly said to everyone in the shrine, "I'm fine. I'll be fine as long as I'm out." Everyone had been paying attention to Sule the moment he went out. Now that they saw that he was safe and sound, everyone's eyes were filled with hope. The inhumane pain was too unbearable, and they also wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. For a moment, many cultivators tried their best to crawl out of the door. They were unwilling to endure the pain for even a second longer. Chapter 5909. Bailey Hongzhuang's original idea was the same as everyone else's. She only thought that after Sule went out, it was very likely that he would lose his life. But looking at the current situation, it was obviously different from what they thought. She recalled that ever since they arrived at the Darkness statue, their lives had not been threatened at all. On the contrary, they had gained a lot of benefits. Even after entering the Darkness Shrine, they felt immense pressure and excruciating pain. But it was clear that the Darkness Shrine did not seal off their escape route. If they really wanted to bury them here, there was no need to open that door at all, nor would they let them leave so easily. After thinking about it, she felt that the Darkness Shrine was full of holiness in her heart. Even though it was pitch black, and everything was inexplicable, she vaguely felt that there was a deeper meaning to it. Perhaps they had already been told in these words, but no one could understand them. That was why they were now in such a state of confusion. "Wife, can you bear it?" Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's handsome face, which was also pale at this moment, but was still breathtaking and beautiful. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded with difficulty. Under such pain, even a movement seemed very difficult. "I can still bear it." Bewitching also felt a little relieved after hearing her words, and his eyes were full of contemplation. "If you can still bear it, let's not go out for the time being." He looked around, and his pale face could not hide the confidence and certainty between his brows. I have a feeling that there's a deeper meaning to this sudden pain. If the darkness shrine wants to chase us out, it doesn't have to waste its energy at all. On the contrary, if this is a test, it makes more sense. I have the same thoughts as you. Lin Li's pitch-black eyes immediately lit up. She didn't expect them to have the same thoughts. I also think that with the power of the darkness shrine, dealing with us is as easy as crushing an ant, but it has no intention of killing us from the beginning to the end. So I think that as long as we can bear it, we shouldn't leave. Bewitching heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on his face. My wife, our hearts are truly linked. Huang Futing and the others were also struggling to hold on. After Bewitching noticed that they were unable to bear it any longer, he told them his thoughts. Now they were a group. If everyone could benefit from this, it would undoubtedly be for the best. Hearing Bewitching's words, Huang Futing and the others were slightly stunned. Their originally determined hearts to leave wavered. If he could really obtain an inheritance or level up by staying here, then it would be worth it even if he had to endure more pain. Of course, there were still many cultivators who could not bear the pain and had already decided to leave. How strange. There seems to be an indescribable restriction here. We can't enter. Su Lei, who was the first to go out, had a change in expression. After the pain disappeared, his mind became active. After thinking about it carefully, he felt that what Bewitching said was very reasonable. Perhaps there might be some great inheritance left in there. So he wanted to try and see if he could go in again. Chapter 59:10. How could this be? The cultivators who came out were also dumbfounded, and all of them tried to enter again. However, the situation was just like what Su Lei had said. When they approached, they realized that there was an invisible barrier at the door that prevented them from entering again. Su Lei was unwilling to let such a situation happen, so he tried to use his power to break the invisible barrier. However, the barrier seemed to be able to rebound the power. Not only was it not damaged, but it even blasted Su Lei away. Bang! Su Lei fell to the ground with a loud thud and spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared at the barrier in shock, but he no longer had the intention to continue attacking. After seeing this scene, the other cultivators who came out also gave up on their plans. They did not want to get seriously injured because of this. The darkness shrine was not willing to let them in. Even if they tried their best, they would not be able to enter. Looking at the people in the hall, they suddenly felt a little envious. If they could hold on for a while longer and not come out, they might really be able to obtain some kind of opportunity in the darkness shrine. The cultivators who originally planned to leave the darkness shrine also changed their minds after seeing this scene. The situation now was very simple. It was obvious that it was easy to leave, but difficult to enter again. Hence, they had to consider it carefully. If they missed this opportunity, they would regret it. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest struggled to hold on in the darkness shrine, but the pain seemed to be endless. Not only did it not show any signs of subsiding, but it also became more and more intense. Time passed bit by bit, and under such circumstances, it felt like time was passing extremely slowly. After a day, everyone in the hall seemed to have lost a lot of weight. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt like her entire body was being crushed, and there was no part of her body that did not hurt. Under the intense pain, her body began to twitch uncontrollably, and cold sweat mixed with blood slowly seeped out of her pores. Even she felt that she might die from the pain if she continued to stay there. The pain was indescribable. Some cultivators who were not mentally strong could no longer bear it. Even though they knew that they had given up an excellent opportunity, they no longer wanted to think about it at this moment. As long as they could stop the pain, they were willing to do anything. Seeing this, Bewitching did not urge them to stay. He knew that everyone had done their best, forcing everyone to stay here. Even he himself did not know what the final result would be. He was only willing to take a gamble here. Another day passed, and the number of cultivators in the darkness shrine decreased by half again. Su Lei and the others were no longer depressed. Compared to these people, they were much more comfortable. At this moment, they were all waiting outside the door, looking at the people inside the hall. They only wanted to know when these people would choose to give up. At the same time, they also wanted to know if there would really be an inheritance if they persevered until the end. When the third day was almost over, there were only a few dozen people left in the hall. Bailey Hongzhuang was lying weakly on the ground. Right now, it was extremely difficult for her to even speak a word. Chapter 59:11. At this moment, everyone's beliefs began to crumble. Perhaps their judgment was wrong from the beginning, and the Darkness Shrine was just trying to use this method to chase them out. However, they were the ones who didn't know what was good for them, and had to endure such pain by staying there. However, they no longer had much strength now, and it was difficult for them to even leave the Darkness Shrine. Everyone was lying limply on the ground, motionless. If it wasn't for their weak breathing, the people outside might have already died. What should we do? We can't go in and bring young master and the rest out. I don't know what the Darkness Shrine is trying to do. We can't keep waiting like this. It would be terrible if young master and madam lose their lives here. After seeing this scene, the Darkness Attribute cultivators of the Mercenary Guild fell into a state of anxiety and worry, and even tried to rush into the shrine again. However, the power of the Darkness Shrine was too strong, and they couldn't do anything apart from injuring themselves. Bewitching looked at the extremely weak Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him, and he felt regretful. He shouldn't have trusted his judgment so much, and let Hongzhuang suffer here. Dear, I'll find a way to send you out. He spoke very slowly, and it was as if he had exhausted all his strength in the past 3 days. However, no matter what, he couldn't let Hongzhuang die here. Hearing his words, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips pulled out a smile with difficulty, a bit of bitterness in her pale face. If you want to go out, let's go out together. I just want to be with you. The other cultivators also tried their best to crawl out, but the distance of more than 10 meters was an insurmountable gap in their eyes. Given their current situation, it was extremely difficult for them to even take a step forward, let alone leave. Bailey Hongzhuang knew in her heart that they might die there. From the day she became a cultivator, she was prepared to face death at any time. In fact, she had already died once, and it was a gift from God to be able to live for so many years. As long as she could be with Bewitching, she was not afraid at all. At this moment, a terrible pain suddenly appeared. Bailey Hongzhuang felt as if she was being dismembered. Shrill cries rang out from the Divine Hall. Even though no one had the strength to speak, they still cried out at that moment. Everyone outside the door was shocked when they heard the voice, and fear appeared on their faces. What's going on? Why is this happening? Everyone looked at each other, as they recalled what they had gone through in the Divine Hall of Darkness. They felt a chill in their hearts. With such a situation happening all of a sudden, would there be any danger? Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Since the day they followed Bewitching, they had become a single entity. Now that Bewitching was in such a situation, how could they not be worried? Bailey Hongzhuang's consciousness gradually dissipated. She felt that every cell in her body was smiling, but the pain had finally left her. Just disappear like this. If you disappear, there won't be any pain. It was a warm feeling. It felt like being in a mother's body. It was warm, comfortable, and filled with a sense of security. Chapter 59:12. Am I dead? A thought surfaced in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind. Am I in heaven? What a comfortable feeling. It doesn't feel like hell at all. If this was death, perhaps this would be a good feeling. Her body was unprecedentedly relaxed. She felt as if she was floating in midair. Her body was unbelievably light. Wife, a familiar voice rang in her ears, instantly triggering her memories. Bewitching, the person she loved the most. Can they still be together after death? She tried her best to open her eyes, but everything was blurry. When everything in front of her gradually became clear, she saw a perfect face that was as handsome as a god. The contours of his face were as sharp as a knife. He was cold and hard, but she couldn't tell if he was handsome or not. Under his sharp eyebrows, his charming eyes were as charming as a black diamond. And at this moment, those eyes were filled with deep affection. Bewitching, Bailey Hongzhuang's face broke into a bright and beautiful smile. That's great. I didn't expect that we could still be together after death. Di Baichen hugged Bailey Hongzhuang as soon as he saw her. His heart seemed to have been hit by something, and his eyes became increasingly gentle. He reached out and patted Bailey Hongzhuang's back gently and carefully, as if he was hugging the world's most precious treasure. Wife, we're not dead. Look around yourself. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang, who was immersed in Di Baichen's embrace, looked around. What she saw was still darkness. Wasn't this the dark shrine that they were in previously? We're not dead. Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. The pain from before was no different from death. Then what's the situation now? Di Baichen smiled faintly and said in a gentle and charming voice, "We won the bet." Won the bet? Bailey Hongzhuang was shocked and immediately understood. So it was a test. That's right. It's a test. Di Baichen nodded. Feel it carefully. Has your cultivation improved by a lot? When Bailey Hongzhuang heard this, she also checked her own cultivation. When she saw it, her face was suddenly filled with astonishment. Level 5 Burning Moon? How is this possible? She had only been at the Radiant Moon realm a moment ago, and had merely fallen asleep. However, she had already broken through to the 5th level of the Radiant Moon realm by the time she woke up. Such an improvement was simply too astonishing. It's true. Di Baichen smiled faintly. Everyone's cultivation has improved by quite a bit. This time we have indeed won the gamble. It's just that the process is somewhat difficult to describe. The despair and pain from before were still vivid in his mind. This kind of test was much more difficult than before. After Huang Futing discovered that he had improved, his eyes were filled with pleasant surprise. Ever since he came to the vicinity of the Statue of Darkness, his cultivation had been rapidly improving. And now, he had directly improved to the Radiant Moon realm in one go. He had almost forgotten how long it had been since he had improved so quickly. An indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. Ever since he had awakened the darkness attribute, he had lived a dark life. From the initial loss of faith and the abandonment of his ideals to the current rapid improvement, all of this made him feel an indescribable feeling. This feeling was as if he had come back to life. Heavens, my strength has improved by so much. Chapter 59:13. If everyone was immersed in the pain of being on the verge of death before, then everyone was immersed in the joy of being reborn at this moment. The feeling of rising from hell to heaven was simply too blissful. At a glance, everyone's faces were brimming with happy smiles. Young master, your judgment is indeed correct, but the test is simply too difficult. Huang Futing looked at Di Baichen in surprise. He was full of admiration for the man in front of him, who was clearly younger than him. Throughout the entire process, his heart could not help but waver, because the process was simply too painful. Although he had obtained inheritances in the past, none of the masters of the ruins were so abnormal. The pain could not be described with words at all. Even when he recalled it at this moment, he still felt lingering fear. The feeling was simply unbearable, and he did not even know how he endured it. The other cultivators, who were immersed in joy, could not help but feel a little guilty. Speaking of which, it was not that they did not want to go out in the end, but they did not have the strength to crawl out at all. Now that they thought about it, it was their fortune. After all, if they relied on daily cultivation, it would probably take several years for such an improvement to be achieved. But now in just 3 days, they had already reached this step. After seeing this scene, the cultivators outside the darkness shrine revealed envious looks in their eyes. The change was truly beyond their expectations. Only the cultivators who came with Huang Futing quietly sighed in relief. Although they were envious, they were more happy that everyone was safe. They would feel very regretful if they missed this opportunity, but they might not be able to withstand the pain, even if they had to go through it again. The cultivators from the other forces were also envious, but they were not too jealous. Perhaps it was because everyone was of the darkness attribute, so they appreciated each other. Baichen, I feel that my physique has improved, and my affinity with dark power is better than before. After carefully sensing the changes in her body, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with joy. She usually felt that her cultivation speed was considered good, but there was clearly a big difference as compared to now. The devil summoning scripture was circulating all the time, but her cultivation speed had greatly increased. If she had been cultivating at this speed before, her cultivation would have been much higher than it was now. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen also nodded. My body of destiny is also stronger than before. I vaguely feel that the pressure and pain we had to endure before didn't seem to be our punishment. On the contrary, it is changing our physique. Through the pressure, it expels the impurities in our body. Later on, the pain is quietly changing our physique. Do you mean that from the moment we entered the darkness shrine, it was a gift to us? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. This idea seemed a little strange, but after thinking about it carefully, it was possible. That kind of pain was too strange. Thinking back carefully, she also felt that everything seemed to be intentionally changing their physiques. That's possible, Di Beichen pondered. Chapter 59:14. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang did not restrain their voices, so Huang Futing and the rest heard it too. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed a little. They had always felt that they had such benefits because they had passed the assessment. During this period of time after waking up, they also felt the changes in their bodies. Now they could confirm that their cultivation speed in the future would be much faster than it was now, which was something that made them happier than suddenly increasing their cultivation level by a few levels. Young master, I think what you said makes sense, Huang Futing could not help but say. Huang Futing couldn't help but say, thinking back to when we were cultivating outside, the darkness statue never had any intention of selecting. It was like a god that enveloped all of us and gave us strength. Perhaps the darkness shrine is not dangerous at all. Otherwise, it wouldn't have let everyone leave so easily. Until now, there have been no casualties at all. Di Beichen nodded slightly. So the darkness shrine itself is a place to guide cultivators in their cultivation and change their physique. If they can withstand the pain, their physique will change. On the other hand, if they can't withstand the pain, they can leave directly. When everyone understood this point, they were immediately in awe, and they felt that their previous thoughts were simply blasphemous. It was because they didn't understand the language of God that they didn't understand anything. Now that they thought about it, the darkness shrine should be a place that everyone respected. It was a great opportunity for them to be lucky enough to be able to enter this place. Bailey Hongzhuang was also very pious at this moment. She originally thought that this was the case only in the Brilliant Shrine, but she didn't expect it to be the same in the Darkness Shrine. There was no selection, and everyone who came here had an equal opportunity. The only thing that led to the different results was everyone's choice. The rich darkness power filled the Darkness Shrine, and after the physique of everyone in the shrine changed, their cultivation speed also increased greatly. Compared to cultivating outside, the cultivation speed here was undoubtedly faster. Hence, no one was in a hurry to leave. Bailey Hongzhuang began to copy the previous words again. After knowing the greatness of the Darkness Shrine, she felt that the words on it were a treasure. Since there was still a chance, there was no harm in copying as much as possible. 2 days later, a sudden surge of energy swept over, enveloping Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, and sending them out of the darkness temple. The sudden burst of power was beyond everyone's expectations. By the time everyone came to their senses, they could only watch as the doors of the darkness sacred palace slowly closed. It seemed that the time was up. As the doors to the darkness sacred palace closed, everyone discovered that the restriction that had prevented them from appearing had reappeared, preventing them from getting any closer. Bailey Hongzhuang looked up at the statue of darkness, which she couldn't see clearly at all, and bowed deeply. She was very grateful for such a gift. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang had a tacit understanding. In Di Beichen's heart, this statue of darkness gave him an even greater shock. He felt that perhaps this was the reason why his master didn't give up his identity as the Dark Holy Sun, even though he liked his wife so much. How could he forget such an unreserved kindness from such a mentor? Chapter 59:15. Beichen, I think we should go back and take a look. Bailey Hongzhuang looked into Di Beichen's deep eyes and heard Di Beichen say with a smile, I think so too. The darkness shrine seemed to be in the same situation as the light temple. Since the darkness shrine had appeared here, the light temple might also appear there. Even if it was too late now, they still had to go and take a look. Maybe they could gain something. After making the decision, they didn't hesitate and immediately prepared to set off. Huangfu, you guys stay here and cultivate. Hong Zhuang and I will go over there and take a look, Di Beichen said. Huangfu Ting nodded. Young master, be careful. We'll meet up when the darkness shrine disappears. This time, when they passed through the darkness shrine, they found that the situation was much better than before. Maybe it was because of the increase in their strength, or maybe it was because of the change in their physique. No matter how they looked at it, this trip to the darkness shrine was excellent. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Hua Xiaoheng came near the light temple again, they saw the Qing devil at a glance. They looked at each other, and their faces turned gloomy. The Qing devil actually appeared again, but why is he with the cultivators of the Jun family? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. She really didn't understand this point. The Qing devil's identity had been exposed. Logically speaking, the Jun family should be very hostile to him and shouldn't accept him. Beichen, you guys are back. Di Xiaofeng immediately smiled when he saw Di Beichen and Hua Xiaoheng. Di Beichen quickly walked to Di Xiaofeng's side and asked in a deep voice, Brother, what's the situation now? The Qing devil is back, but he pretends to be Jun Lingxuan. Xiao Sou has been speaking for him, saying that she is sure that he is Jun Lingxuan. The cultivators of the Jun family and the Xiao family all believe her. Di Xiaofeng briefly explained the situation. No wonder the Jun family can't surpass us all these years. They are just a bunch of idiots. Di Beichen's eyes were full of disdain and sarcasm. How could someone believe this kind of nonsense? Di Xiaofeng nodded in agreement. I also admire their IQ. The Qing devil naturally noticed Di Beichen's appearance. When he turned his eyes to Bailey Hongzhuang, there was a complicated look in his eyes. Facing the Qing devil's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't afraid at all. In the past, their strength couldn't be compared with the Qing devil, so they could only hide. But now they weren't afraid of the Qing devil. If they fought head-on, it was hard to tell who would win. On the contrary, Xiao Sou was nervous. She couldn't help but worry when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Hua Xiaoheng. Every time her plan was ruined by these two guys. Now that she finally convinced everyone that the Qing devil was Jun Lingxuan, she didn't want to be exposed again. Once it was exposed, it would be impossible to convince everyone to believe it again. The keen Bailey Hongzhuang naturally noticed Xiao Seiwu's expression for the first time. Her eyebrows rose slightly, and the smile on her lips had a trace of playfulness. It was the first time she saw Xiao Sou show such an expression. Could it be that Xiao Sou liked the Qing devil more than Jun Lingxuan? This was a little too strange. Chapter 59:16. Noticing Bailey Hongzhuang's playful expression, Xiao Sou's face darkened. This woman was her nemesis. Beichen, you're right. Xiao Sou really likes Qing devil. Bailey Union couldn't help saying. Di Beichen's prediction came true. Di Beichen smiled faintly. From his calm expression, it could be guessed that he was not surprised at all. On the contrary, he had expected all of this. He had guessed it when he saw Xiao Sou and Qing devil together. However, he was not in the mood to deal with Qing devil now. On the contrary, his attention fell on the closed door. It was really the same situation. This was so interesting. However, the inheritance of the darkness temple had ended. Had the inheritance of the light temple not been opened yet? Brother, what's the situation there? Seeing Di Beichen turn his eyes to the light gate, Di Xiaofeng immediately introduced it. This gate suddenly appeared a few days ago. Everyone thought it should be the inheritance of the light statue. During this period of time, everyone had tried many ways to open this door. But from beginning to end, they had not found a way to open it. We have searched everywhere in this area. There is no mechanism at all. As for using brute force, it's even more hopeless. Lin Taxing also said. Now almost everyone has given up, but Qing devil seems to know what's here. Among all of us, he is the one who is most unwilling to give up. He has been trying to find a way, but he just can't get in. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other. If the situation of the two statues was really the same, Then this gate should be opened directly instead of by finding a mechanism. Qing Devil came from the immortal region, so he must know something about this situation. It would be strange if he was not interested in such a big treasure. By the way, Beichen, Lin Taxing's eyes suddenly lit up. Since you've been there, is there such a situation there? Yes, Di Beichen replied. And everyone has already been inside. Di Xiaofeng and the others were all curious. They still hadn't found a way to enter. But the Statue of Darkness had already entered? When Xiren and Shangguan Yingying also came to Di Beichen's side. You're finally back. You haven't come for so long. We wanted to go over there to look for you. Seeing Shangguan Yingying, Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with joy. Yingying, I finally met you. Shangguan Yingying held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand, her pretty face full of joy. I've been looking forward to seeing you all. You were in so much danger before, and I've been very worried and guilty. When I heard that you were safe and sound, I was relieved. We're lucky. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Shangguan Yingying's eyes gradually turned red. You're too silly. Why did you want to help us in that situation? Our lives are not as precious as yours. If anything had happened to you, Xiren and I would not have been able to live. Recalling the scene at that time, she couldn't help but want to cry, but she was more moved. Such a friend was worth risking her life for. Chapter 59-17. Xiren, when did you come over? Di Beichen had a warm smile on his face. Since he was a child, he had always trained with Xiren. He was not used to not seeing Xiren for a while. Yingying and I came out after getting the inheritance. We wanted to find you as soon as possible. Fortunately, the place where we came out was not far from here. Later, we noticed that the light here was unusual, so we came over together. After arriving here, we saw Xiaofeng and the others here. We also knew that you were safe and sound, so we were completely relieved. Xiren's dark and bright eyes were also full of complicated emotions, but as a man, he would not show it all like Shangguan Yingying. But he remembered all this in his heart. These days, although he was trying to improve himself, he was always thinking about Di Beichen and Lin Yiqian. When he thought about whether the two were still alive, his mood was extremely uncomfortable. Now that he saw Di Beichen and others were safe and sound, his mood was unprecedentedly comfortable. Hearing this, Di Beichen also understood. Don't worry, how can anything happen to us? Beichen, you said that the door of the darkness statue was opened. What is inside? Di Xiaofeng was obviously more interested in this. The situation on both sides is so similar. Will the method to open it be the same? There is a hall inside. We call it the Darkness Divinity Hall. The walls are full of words that I can't understand, but I can vaguely judge that it should be related to cultivation. Di Beichen briefly described the situation over there. Everyone was on the same side, so there was naturally no taboo. As for the method to open it, Di Beichen raised his eyebrows. The method to open it is a bit strange. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly chuckled. There is no need to find any way to open the door at all. Beichen opened it directly with a push. As soon as these words came out, Di Xiaofeng and others were taken aback. They opened their mouths wide, full of disbelief. Really, Lin Yi couldn't believe it. How can it be opened with a push? Why would I lie to you? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Everyone's reaction was the same as Huang Futing and the others. Even she found the situation amusing. All of you have already entered the dark shrine. How enviable. We have been here for so long, but no one has been able to open the door. We are really helpless. Shangguan Yingying sighed. She didn't need to think to know that there was something extraordinary in this hall. It was a pity that no one could enter. It was like a delicacy was right in front of them, but they could only stare at it from a step away. When Xiao Shou and the others heard Shangguan Yingying's sigh, their expressions changed. Previously, when Di Beichen and Yi Zichen had been going to the Statue of Darkness for so long, they only thought that they were cultivating there. In fact, other than the difference in attributes, the effects of cultivating on both sides should be the same. However, if Di Beichen and Yi Zichen really entered the Darkness Divinity Hall, then the situation would be different. You said that they entered the Darkness Divinity Hall? Xiao Shou raised her voice. Don't joke around. This is impossible. Chapter 59:18. During this period of time, they had racked their brains, but failed to come up with a solution. Now they were told that Bewitching and Lin Mingya had already entered. How could they accept this? Shangguan Yingying glanced at Xiao Suo coldly and said, "You can't get in. So you think that Hong Zhuang can't get in either? Think about it. There are many things that Hong Zhuang can do that you can't." The sharp voice bluntly exposed Xiao Seiwu's face, causing the latter's face to turn gloomy. However, she couldn't refute her words. After all, she had been at a disadvantage so many times now. If she retorted indignantly, she was almost certain that Shangguan Yingying would have more to say to her. She didn't want to embarrass herself in front of Qing Devil again. At this moment, Qing Devil's voice sounded. "It's fine if Bewitching entered the Darkness Shrine, but it's impossible for Bailey Hongzhuang to enter at all." Qing Devil's dark and deep eyes were full of certainty and confidence, while his lips curled into a mocking sneer. "Even if you want to deceive us, you should at least find a reasonable excuse. The Darkness Shrine won't allow any cultivator who doesn't have the darkness attribute to enter at all." He knew it too well. He came here in the first place because he wanted to enter the Brilliance Shrine. The Brilliance Shrine was different from the Darkness Shrine. The Brilliance Shrine could allow all cultivators who didn't have the darkness attribute to enter, while the Darkness Shrine only allowed cultivators with the darkness attribute to enter. Bailey Hongzhuang was the Holy Maiden of Light, and her attribute was undoubtedly light. It was impossible for other attributes, let alone the light attribute. It was simply a fool's dream. You haven't been there, so how do you know all this? Bewitching looked at Jun Lingxuan with a faint smile in his eyes, and his slightly slanted eyebrows were thought-provoking. Xiao Suo immediately clenched her hands into fists, and she couldn't help but feel a little worried. Ling Sun! This time, she could not allow her identity as the Qing Devil to be exposed. Qing Devil raised his right hand slightly to stop Xiao Suo. "When I took back the control, I also got Qing Devil's memory. He was originally from the ancient battlefield, so it's not strange that he knows more about this place than we do." "That's right." Xiao Suo nodded and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. She was really worried that Qing Devil would ignore everything in a fit of anger. Although this statement was a little strange, it was very possible if one thought about it carefully. "I see." Bewitching dragged out his tone with a hint of mockery. "In that case, you were the one who understood this place the most at that time. Since that's the case, don't be stingy and tell everyone about it." Chu Yingming also said, "Jun Lingxuan, we don't understand the situation here. Since you know, then tell us." "Yes, then we can think of a solution together." For a moment, many forces present agreed. They really had too many questions about the situation in the ancient battlefield. Qing Devil glanced at Bewitching's face coldly. This guy really annoyed him. Now that he had not recovered his strength, he would not take the initiative to find trouble with him. After he recovered his strength, he would definitely get rid of these annoying guys quickly. Chapter 59:19. Every time the Statue of Light appears, it will be of great help to the improvement of the cultivator's strength. Not only that, but there are also some restrictions. The Statue of Light allows cultivators of any attribute other than darkness to cultivate, and the Statue of Darkness only accepts cultivators of the darkness attribute. That's why I'm sure that Bailey Hongzhuang has never entered the Darkness Palace. Qing Devil made a solemn vow. Everyone in the immortal realm knew that this was absolutely impossible, let alone him. However, after hearing Qing Devil's words, everyone was even more confused. "Jun Lingxuan, do you mean that it's impossible for cultivators of the darkness attribute to appear here?" Nangong Yuqing asked. Qing Devil nodded. "That's right. Aren't you talking nonsense?" Nangong Yuqing shook his head and rolled his eyes. Bewitching is here, and he has the darkness attribute. As soon as he said that, everyone nodded. They felt that Qing Devil was just trying to please the crowd. The truth was right in front of them. Even if he wanted to make up an excuse, he shouldn't be so lame. Yes, Bewitching not only came here, but also cultivated here for several days. If you said that cultivators of the darkness attribute couldn't enter the Light Palace, I would believe you. But you said that he couldn't appear here. Aren't you lying through your teeth? For a moment, everyone looked at Jun Lingxuan with disdain. This guy was just trying to attract attention. Xiao Souo also looked embarrassed. She didn't know why Qing Devil suddenly said that. The cultivators of the Jun family and the Xiao family couldn't help but lower their heads. How shameful. Young master, why didn't you use your brain when you came back? Qing Devil also fell into a daze. At this moment, what he cared about was not shameful, but he knew that what he said was true. But how did Di Beichen appear here? This didn't make any sense at all. He opened his mouth, his eyes wide as he stared at Di Beichen in disbelief. He simply couldn't understand what had gone wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. They could guess what Qing Devil was thinking at this moment. This guy would never have guessed that the two of them would have dual attributes. Di Xiaofeng and the others who knew the situation couldn't help but snicker. They were also happy to see Qing Devil being slapped in the face. Azure Fiend, could you have remembered it wrongly? Xiao Souo asked the Malakian Fiend through voice transmission, after seeing that everyone had retracted their gaze. Qing Devil turned around. Although there was still some doubt and confusion in her eyes, she sounded quite certain. That's impossible. I can't be wrong about that. Seeing Qing Devil's serious look, Xiao Souo couldn't help muttering. In fact, she also thought that Qing Devil must have made a mistake. But if he didn't, it would be strange. There must be something wrong. Azure Fiend's eyes shone with a sharp and serious light. There must be something that he had not thought through. Otherwise, such a situation would never have happened. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen didn't bother to talk to Qing Devil at all. They walked slowly toward the Divine Hall of Light. Beichen, why don't you have a try? Chapter 59:20. Even if the way to open the two divine palaces is the same, you're the one who can open them, Di Beichen said with a smile, his bright eyes full of confidence. His wife was the one chosen by the Divine Hall of Light. I'm not sure if I can open this door, but why don't you try and see if you can open it a little? That was the situation on the other side. If Beichen could also push this door open a crack, that would be really interesting. Di Beichen understood what Bailey Hongzhuang meant, and immediately stepped forward, approaching the door of the Divine Hall of Light. After seeing Di Beichen and his wife's actions, Xu Yingming and the others were more and more certain that Jun Lingxuan was talking nonsense. Di Beichen was trying to open the door of the Divine Hall of Light. On the contrary, many cultivators couldn't help but think that since Bailey Hongzhuang could go to the Divine Hall of Light, they should be able to go there too. Perhaps they would be able to obtain some other opportunities after going there? Everyone suddenly became excited. If they couldn't do it here, they could try the other way. Qing Devil's eyes were fixed on Di Beichen. The closer Di Beichen was to the Statue of Light, the more surprised he was. This was unbelievable. He even wanted those guys in the immortal realm to see if everything in front of him was real. A tall and straight figure stood in front of the door of the Divine Hall of Light. The dazzling light shrouded him, making him look like a god. His white back seemed to have completely blended into the light, giving off a sacred and inviolable aura. Just the sight of his back was enough to move people's hearts. Di Beichen looked at the tightly closed door in front of him, which was covered with simple patterns without any words. However, these seemingly simple patterns gave off a lofty aura. Di Beichen slowly stretched out his hand. Facing the strong aura of light, he was also devout. This kind of power was unimaginably powerful. You're overestimating yourself. Seeing that Di Beichen intended to open the door directly, Qing Devil showed a hint of disdain in her eyes. Previously, they had already tried all methods, but they were still unable to open this door. After Di Beichen arrived, he planned to push her away without saying anything. This was too whimsical. Di Beichen is used to being arrogant. It's not strange at all. Xiao Souo had a venomous look on her face. Every time she saw the man who had once been engaged to her, her feelings became extremely complicated. Could it be that Beichen really pushed open the door of the Darkness Shrine? Lin Qianqian was speechless. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang was serious, she had never taken it to heart. Although Hongzhuang had always been a cautious person, she would often joke around with them. However, at this moment, after seeing Di Beichen's actions, She suddenly felt that everything Hong Zhuang had said previously might be true. Lin Taxing couldn't help but be stunned when he heard that, but he couldn't help but smirk. If Beichen really pushes this door open, Qing Devil will probably be infuriated to death. He remembered very clearly that Qing Devil had been struggling with this door for a long time. Regardless of whether they pushed, kicked, used brute force, or gathered everyone's power, the door remained motionless and showed no signs of opening. Chapter 59:21. Because Qing Devil was so concerned about this matter, they were sure that there must be a great treasure here. Squeak. The dull sound attracted everyone's attention. Almost immediately, everyone's eyes turned to the tightly shut door. In their line of sight, Di Beichen's hands were placed on top of the door, and in everyone's eyes, the unshakable door actually had a gap. That's right. It was just a crack. The crack was not big, but it was clearly displayed in front of everyone. At this moment, no one could sit still. Everyone stood up and rushed to Di Beichen's side. He opened the door just like that? Nangong Yuqing stared at Di Beichen in a daze, and he was extremely shocked. Recalling his desperate appearance before, the corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. Was this door discriminating against him? Was the gap between him and Di Beichen so big? My God, it's true. Xiren couldn't help but complain. Beichen's strength has improved a lot recently. Shangguan Yingying said excitedly. Haha, I always feel that Beichen and Hong Zhuang are two magical people. Let's go and have a look. The Malakian fiend did not know what to say at this moment. Everything that he remembered was not wrong. However, he just said that Di Beichen couldn't get close to the Statue of Light. Now Di Beichen opened the door of the Statue of Light. This was not a slap to his face, but a kick to his face. Even he felt that he had lost face at this moment. The cultivators of the Jun family couldn't help but sigh, after seeing the dark expression on their young master's face. Wherever Di Beichen appeared, their young master would have this expression. Regarding this, they were also very helpless. After Di Beichen opened the door a little, there was a smile in his eyes. Wife, your judgment is correct. Previously, he did not see how Hong Zhuang had opened the door. Now that he had experienced it firsthand, he understood. After pushing open a crack, no matter how hard he tried, the door would not budge. It was completely different from when he pushed open the door of darkness. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Beichen, I feel that all of this is very magical. Why was it that when so many people were unable to push it away, it was different when it was in their hands? What did all this mean? Di Beichen's eyes darkened. He also felt that all of this had a deeper meaning. Unfortunately, they were unable to find out the answer for now. However, he did not feel disappointed because of this. He always felt that there was a mysterious force guiding them, and he believed that there would be a chance in the future to figure it out. Qing Devil walked quickly to Di Beichen and Xia Shaluo. Looking at the gap in front of her, she was extremely shocked. He could not believe that Di Beichen could push open the door so easily. Thinking of this, he could not help but try again. However, he found that the door was extremely heavy and could not be moved at all. Di Beichen, since you can push open the door, you should completely push it open, Nangong Yuqing could not help but say. Everyone could not help but feel excited. As long as they pushed open the door, they would be able to get in touch with the inheritance inside. Chapter 59:22. Di Xiaofeng looked at Di Beichen, who had stopped moving after pushing the door open. He lowered his voice and said, Beichen, even if you don't want everyone to go in, there's no other way. No one will be willing to leave. We don't know when this door will disappear. In my opinion, it's better to just push it open. Listening to Di Xiaofeng's words, Di Beichen couldn't help but laugh. His big brother was really. Big brother, it's not that I don't want to push it open, but I can't. Di Xiaofeng was stunned and looked at Di Beichen in astonishment. You're not joking, are you? Of course not. Di Beichen chuckled. I'm not the one chosen by this door. Only Hong Zhuang can completely push it open. Beichen's words make sense. Hong Zhuang is the holy maiden of the light. Among us, the one most likely to open this door is Hong Zhuang. Lin Qianqian said. Xiao Shou also felt disdain after hearing Bewitching and the others' conversation. Bewitching really wanted to support Bailey Hongzhuang at all times. The reason why he said this was to set off Bailey Hongzhuang's status as the Holy Maiden of the Light. She didn't believe that all of this was true. In the next moment, Xiao Shou walked to the door and said, "Let me try." In terms of the power of light, Bailey Hongzhuang was only slightly stronger than her. Since Bewitching had already pushed the door open, it should be even easier to push it open. If she could push the door open, then all the glory would naturally belong to her. In this way, she would be able to completely turn the tables, instead of letting Bailey Hongzhuang steal all the limelight. Hongzhuang. Noticing Xiao Shou's actions, Sheng Guanning couldn't help but remind Bailey Hongzhuang that such a good opportunity couldn't be taken away by Xiao Shou. Bailey Hongzhuang only shook her head slightly, indicating for Sheng Guanning to rest assured. If Xiao Shou could push it open, it would be a miracle. After seeing Xiao Shou's confident look, the others were also curious. They didn't know if she could really succeed. Suddenly, Xiao Shou's hands pushed forward, but found that the door didn't move. Impossible. Xiao Shou's eyes narrowed, and she once again pushed forward with all her strength. However, the result was still the same. Everyone sighed and shook their heads. It was a mistake to place their hopes on Xiao Shou. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Xiao Shou indifferently. "If you don't give up, you can try again." Her casual words directly poked Xiao Shou's sore spot. She had already lost face, and now she was mercilessly ridiculed by Bailey Hongzhuang. Her face turned from white to blue, from blue to red, and finally became as red as a pig's liver. She stared at Bailey Hongzhuang with resentment. Then she lowered her head and slowly retreated behind Qing Devil. At this moment, she really wished she could find a crack to hide in. She couldn't understand why Bewitching could push the door open, but she couldn't. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang stood in front of the door. "Bailey Hongzhuang, I don't think you can succeed." Xiao Shudong couldn't help but say, "Now you are laughing at my sister. Let's see what you can do when you are embarrassed later." "Xiao Shudong, you are always worrying about others. Why don't you worry about yourself?" Bailey Hongzhuang said indifferently. Xiao Shudong snorted and crossed his arms in front of his chest, waiting to see a good show. Chapter 59-23. The other cultivators were astonished when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's confident look. Bailey Hongzhuang had always kept a low profile, but she was different when she met Xiao Shou and the others. Speaking of which, even the onlookers felt that these people were destined to be her enemies in her previous life. As long as they met, they were destined to fight. As Bailey Hongzhuang stood in front of the door, everyone's attention was drawn to her, as they looked nervous and excited. Xiao Shou had failed and Bailey Hongzhuang was their only hope. If Bailey Hongzhuang was unable to open this door, then they were afraid that they would have no fate with the inheritance of the Divine Light statue. Seeing that everyone's attention had shifted to Bailey Hongzhuang, Xiao Shou raised her head. Her eyes were filled with undisguised disgust and resentment. She kept repeating in her heart that Bailey Hongzhuang would fail, even if she had to give up this inheritance. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang was humiliated in front of everyone, she was willing to do so. Bailey Hongzhuang had always kept a low profile, so she rarely did anything embarrassing. Today she was acting out of character. Wasn't this a good opportunity? Looking at the door of light in front of her, the simple and mysterious pattern inexplicably calmed Bailey Hongzhuang's heart. She was full of respect, piety, and yearning as she slowly stretched out her hands and pushed the door. Time seemed to stand still. Everyone held their breaths as they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. Success or failure depended on this move. Bailey Hongzhuang did not sense the crowd's nervousness at all. She only slowly pushed the door open. She did not use any more strength, just like how she usually did. Rumble. A dull sound was heard. The door, which was as heavy as 1,000 caddies and could not be shaken in everyone's eyes, was actually like an ordinary door at this moment. It opened with a gentle push. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but be dumbfounded. Thinking back to how they had tried their best, they couldn't even move a single inch. However, in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, it couldn't be any easier. If there was no comparison, then there would be no harm. This was too frustrating for them. Lin Taxing and the others could not help but look at each other after seeing this scene. They were sure that everything Bailey Hongzhuang had said before was true. There was no deception at all. Hongzhuang actually pushed him away with just a gentle push. That's too scary. Lin Qianqian's lips twitched. So, why were they trying so hard just now? Lin Taxing nodded. So it's not surprising that the gate of the Statue of Darkness was opened by Beichen. Looking at the door that was easily pushed open, Xiao Sudong could no longer maintain his previous calm posture. His eyes were wide open, and his head couldn't help but lean forward. Every nerve in his body was expressing the shock and disbelief in his heart. How is this possible? Xiao Suo was also dumbfounded. Bailey Hongzhuang had actually pushed the door open. Could it be that this was really the inheritance of the Saint of Light? Even if Bailey Hongzhuang had snatched the position of the Saint of Light, she did not think that there was a big gap between them. However, the scene in front of her gave her a resounding slap in the face. She had pushed so hard, but the door did not move at all. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had opened it with just a casual push. Chapter 59-24. This sense of defeat and humiliation did not only come from Bailey Hongzhuang, but also from Di Beichen. If it was only Bailey Hongzhuang who did it, it would be fine. After all, she was the Holy Maiden of Light, and everyone would not bring up the previous matter again. But now, it was not only Bailey Hongzhuang who had opened this door. Even Di Beichen had opened a crack. On the other hand, they had always been known as the #1 light attribute genius, but they had never thought that they could not even open a crack. The practitioners of the Xiao family lowered their heads one after another. First, it was Jun Lingxuan who had made a fool of himself, and now it was their young Mississippi. What was going on? For a moment, they even felt that it was wrong to go against Di Beichen from the beginning. During this period of time, they had never stopped competing with Di Beichen, but almost every time they would lose. Fortunately, after experiencing so many things, everyone seemed to have gradually gotten used to it, and could be considered to have some understanding. Bailey Hongzhuang turned her gaze and looked at Xiao Suo and Xiao Sudong, who were not far away. Her eyebrows were slightly raised, and her beautiful and refined face rippled with a faintly discernible playful smile. Xiao Sudong, now you don't have to worry about me, right? As soon as these words came out, Xiao Sudong's face immediately flushed red, and even his ears were so red that it seemed as if they could drip blood. He stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang. His slightly agitated mouth seemed to have countless things to say, but in the end, he was like a deflated balloon, and his whole person was dejected, not saying a word. What else could he say? Could it be that he felt that he had not lost enough face? Bailey Hongzhuang had no intention to pay attention to Xiao Sudong anymore. Speaking of which, Xiao Sudong was the young master of the Xiao family, and if there were no accidents, the position of the family head should fall on his head in the future. However, based on the current situation, it was obvious that he did not have the ability to take charge of everything on his own. At present, the person in the limelight in the Xiao family was Xiao Suo. After all, in the past few years, she had always been known as the Holy Maiden of Light. As the door was opened, everyone could not help but look inside. After staying outside the door for so long, they were really too curious. In their line of sight, an unusually bright hall appeared in their line of sight. The ceiling of the hall was inlaid with huge luminous pearls, and the dazzling and pure light power filled the entire hall. There were also many characters engraved on the walls of the hall, but the content was also indecipherable. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the text on the wall, and was a little surprised, because the text was different from the text she had seen in the Dark Temple. Why are the words of the shrine? Could it be that these are not words? This was really a little of light of light. Of light of light. Of light of light of light. Di Beichen turned his eyes to Qing Devil. Qing Devil was from the immortal realm. If the words on the wall were from the immortal realm, then Qing Devil would definitely be able to understand them. After entering the hall, Qing Devil looked at the words around him in surprise. The rich light power hit him in the face, and he felt indescribably comfortable. This was the place that he had always dreamed of entering. After waiting for so many years, he finally got his wish. Sure enough, the situation here was the same as what he had understood at the beginning. It was as sacred as a fairyland, with an inviolable holy aura. Chapter 59-25. Almost all the cultivators subconsciously closed their eyes after entering the radiant shrine, carefully feeling the feeling of the light energy passing through their bodies. Their bodies were unprecedentedly relaxed, as if they could float in the air. Some injured cultivators were surprised to find that their wounds began to heal under the envelopment of the power of light. Even the pill toxins that had accumulated in their bodies for many years, and even the hidden dangers of cultivation, seemed to have quietly disappeared. This feeling could not be described with words. Oh my God, the feeling of the power of light flowing through my body is so wonderful. How good would it be if I could stay in a place like this forever? I really want to stay here forever. My cultivation has been progressing at a godly speed recently. When I first entered the ancient battlefield, I was a little depressed. After walking for so long, I didn't gain anything, but now I feel that I was right to come. Even if I could find a lot of treasures in the past, it would definitely not be as great as this time. Everyone sighed with emotion. Almost everyone had the same thoughts. Just staying here for a while was enough to dispel all the disappointment from before. Even if they obtained treasures of heaven and earth, it could not compare to the improvement of their cultivation in their eyes. Moreover, the hidden injuries in their bodies had disappeared. Usually, even if they paid a huge price, they could not completely cure it. If they told all the cultivators in the outside world about everything here, there would be people who would be envious to death. Hong Zhuang, did you feel the same when you entered the Dark Palace? Shangguan Yingying stood beside Bailey Hong Zhuang, her delicate face full of curiosity. It's a little similar. Bailey Hong Zhuang nodded slightly. Although it was pitch black there, it was of great help to our cultivation. I think it should be the difference in attributes. Everything else is the same. Xiren said slowly. Speaking of which, I really envy you. You have 2 attributes, and can enter from both sides. Bewitching raised his eyebrows. Maybe there will be a metal attribute statue in the future. You should be satisfied. Maybe there really will be one. Xiren's eyes lit up. This time I obtained the inheritance, and my cultivation improved with great difficulty. I thought that I would be able to surpass you this time, but now, it seems like there's no hope. Bewitching's lips curled into a faint smile. You, this fellow, haven't changed your mind after so many years. Of course, that's my obsession. When Xiren chuckled. But I'm already used to being second place forever. Beichin, the hall of the Statue of Light is much smaller than the one over there. What's going on? Deep in thought, Bailey Hong Zhuang carefully observed her surroundings. The size of the hall in front of her was naturally not small. Even though there were so many of them gathered here, it still seemed empty. However, compared to the massive hall of the Darkness Shrine, there was clearly a huge gap. Since light and darkness have always been opposites, although many situations are very similar, there should still be some small differences. Bewitching pondered. We don't have to worry for the time being. Since we're here, we'll figure it out eventually. Bailey Hong Zhuang nodded slightly. When they first entered the Darkness Shrine, nothing happened, and it only appeared later. Chapter 59-26. Almost all the cultivators subconsciously closed their eyes after entering the radiant shrine, carefully feeling the feeling of the light energy passing through their bodies. Their bodies were unprecedentedly relaxed, as if they could float in the air. Some injured cultivators were surprised to find that their wounds began to heal under the envelopment of the power of light. Even the pill toxins that had accumulated in their bodies for many years, and even the hidden dangers of cultivation, seemed to have quietly disappeared. This feeling could not be described with words. Oh my God, the feeling of the power of light flowing through my body is so wonderful. How good would it be if I could stay in a place like this forever? I really want to stay here forever. My cultivation has been progressing at a godly speed recently. When I first entered the ancient battlefield, I was a little depressed. After walking for so long, I didn't gain anything, but now I feel that I was right to come. Even if I could find a lot of treasures in the past, it would definitely not be as great as this time. Everyone sighed with emotion. Almost everyone had the same thoughts. Just staying here for a while was enough to dispel all the disappointment from before. Even if they obtained treasures of heaven and earth, it could not compare to the improvement of their cultivation in their eyes. Moreover, the hidden injuries in their bodies had disappeared. Usually, even if they paid a huge price, they could not completely cure it. If they told all the cultivators in the outside world about everything here, there would be people who would be envious to death. Hong Zhuang, did you feel the same when you entered the Dark Palace? Shangguan Yingying stood beside Bailey Hong Zhuang, her delicate face full of curiosity. It's a little similar. Bailey Hong Zhuang nodded slightly. Although it was pitch black there, it was of great help to our cultivation. I think it should be the difference in attributes. Everything else is the same. Xiren said slowly. Speaking of which, I really envy you. You have 2 attributes, and can enter from both sides. Bewitching raised his eyebrows. Maybe there will be a metal attribute statue in the future. You should be satisfied. Maybe there really will be one. Xiren's eyes lit up. This time I obtained the inheritance, and my cultivation improved with great difficulty. I thought that I would be able to surpass you this time, but now, it seems like there's no hope. Bewitching's lips curled into a faint smile. You, this fellow, haven't changed your mind after so many years. Of course, that's my obsession. When Xiren chuckled. But I'm already used to being the number 2 forever. Bewitching, the Hall of the Statue of Light is much smaller than the one over there. What's going on? Deep in thought, Bailey Hong Zhuang carefully observed her surroundings. The size of the hall in front of her was naturally not small. Even though there were so many of them gathered here, it still seemed empty. However, compared to the massive hall of the Darkness Shrine, there was clearly a huge gap. Since light and darkness have always been opposites, although many situations are very similar, there should still be some small differences. Bewitching pondered. We don't have to worry for the time being. Since we're here, we'll figure it out eventually. Bailey Hong Zhuang nodded slightly. When they first entered the Darkness Shrine, nothing happened, and it only appeared later. Chapter 59-27. Bewitching slowly walked up to Qing Devil. After noticing his appearance, Qing Devil looked a little scared. Qing Devil, since you are from the immortal realm, you should be able to understand the words on the wall, right? Bewitching said in a cold voice. While looking at the words on the wall in front of him, he glanced at Qing Devil, who was not far away from him. You know about the immortal realm? Qing Devil didn't intend to pay attention to Bewitching at first. He could sense that Bewitching's cultivation had improved a lot recently. Although Qin Haodong had improved a lot recently, he didn't want to do something he wasn't sure about. Besides, in his eyes, nothing was more important than the inheritance of the Divine Hall of Light. He didn't want to waste his time on Bewitching at this critical moment. However, it was strange that Bewitching knew about the immortal realm. As far as he knew, the guys in the upper world didn't know about the existence of the immortal realm at all. I know, Bewitching said calmly. If you don't want to be targeted by me here, tell me about it. Are you threatening me? Qing Devil's voice suddenly turned cold. His dark eyes were filled with cold light, as if there were endless sharp knives shooting at Bewitching. In his eyes, this insignificant guy dared to threaten him? Ah! Bewitching's lips curled into a bloodthirsty arc. His black jade-like eyes didn't have the slightest bit of warmth, but for some reason, they carried an unparalleled murderous aura. I know you used to be a strong man, but now you are occupying Jun Lingshuan's body. Even if you have countless better ways to improve, it will take time. You should be clear about the situation now. If we really fight, you will be the one who will die. Bewitching casually turned his gaze away. His indifferent appearance was as if he was commenting on a landscape painting, but every word and sentence made people tremble with fear. Do you know why I didn't kill you directly? Qing Devil was shocked. Just because of this? Bewitching raised his eyebrows and looked at him mockingly. His expression had explained everything. The look in the Azure Fiend's eyes gradually changed from the initial coldness to a complicated one. This damn guy in front of him made him feel very difficult to deal with. If he was still the old him, Bewitching wouldn't even be qualified to challenge him. Similarly, he also understood that everything Bewitching said at the moment was true. Bewitching's eyes made him afraid. He had seen this kind of dangerous eyes and indifferent attitude. He had seen it before. This kind of guy, if given enough time and opportunity, would definitely become a very terrifying guy in the future. Not only him, but also Bailey Hongzhuang. With the two of them together, they were definitely an existence that would give their enemies a headache. Qing Emo was silent for a moment before he suddenly said, "I can make a deal with you." "Let's hear it. Bailey Hongzhuang once took something from me. As long as she gives it back to me, I will tell you all about the situation of this temple." Bewitching was surprised to hear this. He didn't know when Hongzhuang took something from Qing Devil. Bailey Hongzhuang walked over slowly, after noticing the conversation between Bewitching and Qing Devil. Hearing Qing Devil's words, she checked her storage ring. Chapter 59:28. In the process of searching, she also found some things in the palace. She was in a hurry, and thought it might be something good, so she threw it into the storage ring one after another. After she found out that everything was an illusion, she understood that everything she had put away was just an illusion. It was nothing at all. When they came out of the illusion, everything naturally ceased to exist. She didn't expect that there was something here, but she didn't pay attention to it for a while. After searching for a while, she found a scroll. She remembered that when she first saw this ancient scroll, she was a little surprised because this thing looked too old, but it was well preserved. Since Qing Devil cared so much about it, it must be something extraordinary. She just glanced at it, and didn't look at it carefully. It was all thanks to Malakian Fiend's reminder. Otherwise, she did not know when she would have noticed the scroll in her storage ring. When she had the time, she would definitely study it properly. Qing Devil's eyes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang, with a little eagerness. "Do you agree to this deal?" "Of course not," Bewitching said calmly. Qing Devil was stunned, and his eyes became complicated. "Why? Now we have all the advantages. You are not qualified to negotiate with us at all. Why should we agree to your deal?" Bewitching chuckled. "Logically speaking, you should be our senior. Why are you so naive?" Qing Devil's face became extremely gloomy. He stared at Bewitching angrily. Obviously, this guy tricked him on purpose. And he was tricked. This was a disgrace. "Tell me everything you know about the Temple of Light," said Linley. Bewitching stared at Qing Devil with his dark eyes. He didn't show any fierceness, but Qing Devil felt an indescribable pressure. This guy was going to threaten him until the end. Qing Emo subconsciously looked around. Although he had the support of the Jun family and the Xiao family, compared to the helpers of Bewitching and the others, these people were simply not enough to look at. The only way was to leave here. But he was unwilling to leave here. He had waited for this opportunity for so many years. How could he give it up because of this? Thinking of this, Qing Devil couldn't help but feel depressed. The guy he possessed was too weak. Not only was his cultivation weak, but as the young master of a family, he had a good relationship with only the family he married into. He didn't even have a close relationship with the other families. He didn't know how this guy became the young master of a family. How could the family have a good future with such an ability? It was no wonder that the Jun family had been unable to defeat the D family all these years. Just this point alone was enough to show it. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching stood on both sides. From the perspective of the two people, no matter which direction Qing Emo chose to leave, they would be able to stop him in the first moment. After careful consideration, Qing Devil chose to compromise. A wise man submits to circumstances. He would have plenty of opportunities to take revenge in the future. What do you want to know? Everything you know about the Divine Palace of Light. Chapter 59:29. These were all precious treasures. Even if they couldn't understand them, they would still feel their hearts trembling. If they could understand them, they would probably be in a state of shock right now. They couldn't judge whether what Qing Devil said was true or false. This guy was not an honest person. Coupled with the previous hatred between the two sides, it was not easy to hear one or two truthful words from his mouth. Fortunately, Qing Devil was not the only person they knew in the immortal region. When they went back, they would take the content to consult several elders such as Granny Hua. They were not like Qing Devil. What they said could be completely trusted. Xiao Soa noticed that Qing Devil was communicating with Bailey Hongzhuang. She was shocked. These two guys had always been against them. Maybe they were thinking about how to expose Qing Devil's face at this moment. She walked quickly to Qing Devil's side. Her face was full of nervousness. What do you want to do? Don't be so nervous. We are just communicating. Bewitching looked at Xiao Soa with a faint smile. Are you so worried that others will expose your lie? As soon as these words came out, Xiao Soa's heart skipped a beat. She knew that this kind of thing could be hidden from others, but it couldn't be hidden from Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't have the time to talk nonsense with her at this moment. Facing so much content, Bailey Hongzhuang naturally wouldn't delay. She immediately took out a pen and paper and copied again. Most cultivators were immersed in cultivation at this moment. Cultivating at this moment would definitely yield twice the result with half the effort. Lin Yi was a little surprised when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang taking out a pen and paper and copying so seriously. Second cousin-in-law, are you going to copy all the content here? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. I always feel that these contents should be very precious. Since I have encountered it, I have to copy it even if I don't understand it. Hearing this, Lin Yi looked around with emotion. But everyone is basically cultivating now. Such a good opportunity is rare. Usually, there was not much difference in their cultivations, but if they spent all their time copying, then their cultivations would be weaker than the other cultivators. This would be extremely disadvantageous for their future training and competition. Seeing Lin Yi's worried look, Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled lightly. Don't worry. Don't worry about me. Such a good opportunity is hard to come by. You should also seize the opportunity to cultivate. The more you raise your cultivation, the more benefits you'll receive in the future. Don't you need me to copy it for you? No need. Beichin and I can copy it ourselves. The cultivation techniques of Lin Yi and others were obviously different from theirs. Even in such an environment, they couldn't operate on their own. Naturally, they had to seize the opportunity. At this moment, Xiao Xuanzi was also staying beside Beichin. In such a good environment, its cultivation could also increase rapidly. They had left Xiao Xuanzi behind when they were heading to the Darkness Shrine. After all, this guy's strength also needed to be improved to keep up with everyone. After returning, Beichin noticed that Xiao Xuanzi's cultivation had improved a lot compared to before. As a mystical fire monster rock, its cultivation talent was still very abnormal. Otherwise, it would be impossible to catch up with everyone's cultivation in such a short time. Chapter 59:30. Ling Sun, what did you say to them just now? Xiao Soa asked in a low voice. Did you admit it? Qing Devil turned around and glanced at Xiao Soa coldly. Even if I don't admit it, do you think they won't find out? That's not it. Xiao Soa was a little embarrassed. Whenever she faced Qing Devil, she would subconsciously feel nervous. I'm just worried that they will expose you. You don't have to worry about it. Qing Devil turned around and continued to copy the contents on the wall. The reason why he pretended to be Jun Lingxuan and appeared here was to obtain the inheritance of the Light Shrine. Once he got out of here, he wouldn't care about this identity at all. He was Qing Devil. Why would he need to live as Jun Lingxuan? Seeing that Qing Devil couldn't be bothered to pay attention to her, a trace of disappointment flashed across Xiao Soa's eyes, but she soon cheered up. She knew Qing Devil's character very well. He had always been cold to her, so it was good that he was willing to pay attention to her. She believed that she had a certain place in Qing Devil's heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and Beichin quickly copied the contents. These days, the two of them had become very familiar with copying. However, this place was different from the Darkness Shrine. In the Darkness Shrine, they had many helpers, so the speed of copying was much faster than it was now. However, because this hall was obviously not as large as the Darkness Shrine, it took about the same amount of time overall. Bailey Hongzhuang also gained some enlightenment in her mind during the copying process. It was as if there were countless words jumping in her mind, and her entire brain was filled with the power of light. Emptiness. All the thoughts and memories seemed to have been cast aside at this moment, and all that was left was the endless power of light. All of a sudden, the people who were cultivating felt an extremely pure power of light coming from beside them, causing them to involuntarily look over. After taking a look, they were surprised to find that the source of the power turned out to be Bailey Hongzhuang. He saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was still in the middle of copying, but her empty eyes seemed to have wandered elsewhere. The rich power of light lingered from her body, and the dazzling light surrounded her. She was as sacred and inviolable as the fairy of the ninth heaven. It was an indescribable sense of sacredness. At that moment, everyone even felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was on a completely different level from them. Her delicate facial features appeared even more dazzling under the dazzling light, exuding a breathtaking beauty. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths. He knew that Hongzhuang. It was the same reaction that he had when he was in front of the gate of the Darkness Shrine. However, Hongzhuang's performance after she entered a meditative state was even more shocking. Is this why the Holy Maiden is different from the rest? Bailey Hongzhuang really deserves to be called the Holy Maiden of the Light. She looks just like a god. That's precisely why she can open the door of the shrine so easily. If it were any other cultivator of the light attribute, they wouldn't be able to do it at all. Xiao Soa looked at the woman who was emitting a dazzling light, and her heart was filled with jealousy. The glory that once belonged to her had all been snatched away by Bailey Hongzhuang. Most importantly, she had never had anything like this woman before. Chapter 59:31. Not only Xiao Soa, but some cultivators also took out their pens and paper. Although they didn't expect to be as powerful as Bailey Hongzhuang, if they could gain some enlightenment from it, the benefits would definitely be greater than cultivating here. At this moment, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, they could feel that her aura seemed to be purer than usual. After seeing everyone's actions, Di Xiaofeng and the others' lips twitched slightly. These guys were really going with the flow. How naive. Didn't they think about Hongzhuang's talent in the light attribute? They can't even compare to her. Shangguan Yingying shook her head. She was very clear about the difference between her and Hongzhuang, so she didn't think about anything and continued to cultivate. In her opinion, she was very lucky to have come to the ancient battlefield this time, to obtain the inheritance of the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Now that she had the opportunity to improve her cultivation, this kind of opportunity was much better than cultivating in the outside world. What she wanted to do now was to seize the opportunity and improve as soon as possible. Di Beichen also entered a meditative state during the process of copying. Rich light energy floated around his body, bright and dazzling. His black hair poured down in torrents, beautiful and charming. His thin and tall figure sat on the ground, exuding a proud and holy aura. A pair of deep eyes were confident and proud, domineering and noble. He was like a god, exuding a dazzling brilliance. Everyone looked at the two white figures and felt that the two were an immortal couple, completely untainted by the aura of mortals. Mo Yunjue looked at the dazzling picture scroll, and a trace of complexity and sadness flashed in his eyes. But soon, he sorted out his emotions and began to cultivate again. Xiao Soa was copying the words while thinking that she must quickly enter a meditative state. Only in this way could she let everyone take her seriously again. She then looked at the Malachian fiend who was next to her. Qing Devil had been copying here since the beginning. Among everyone, only he and Bailey Hongzhuang were doing the same thing. Did this mean that Qing Devil also knew the benefits of copying? Ling Sun, how long do you need to copy before you can enter a meditative state? Hearing this, Qing Devil looked at Xiao Soa speechlessly. It depends on the opportunity to enter a meditative state. It has nothing to do with copying. Does this woman have a donkey's brain? Although he was surprised that Bailey Hongzhuang and Ling Sun could enter a meditative state at this time, He also understood that their attainments in the light attribute must be far superior to others. After obtaining Jun Lingxuan's memories, he also knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was the saintess of the light. Originally, he had been dismissive of the so-called saint of light from the upper realm. But now, it seemed that she was indeed quite capable. Wait! Qing Devil's eyes immediately. Far's attainments in the light attribute? How could this be possible? Qing Devil turned his eyes to Bewitching. Isn't this guy a practitioner of the dark attribute? How could he enter a meditative state in the divine hall of light? The Malachian fiend felt his mind go blank for a moment. After a while, he finally thought of a possible answer. Bewitching definitely had more than the dark attribute. It was very likely that he had awakened the light attribute at the same time. Xiao Soa saw that Qing Devil suddenly stopped talking to her. She couldn't help waving her hand in front of his eyes. Ling Sun, what's wrong with you? What are you thinking about? Chapter 5932. How is this possible? Qing Devil looked at Bewitching in disbelief. This news was even more shocking than anything before. It was not impossible for a cultivator to awaken two attributes, but it was really rare for a cultivator to awaken two attributes at the same time. These two attributes were opposite to each other. It was impossible for them to coexist. Ling Sun, what are you talking about? Xiao Soa was confused. She didn't know what was wrong with Qing Devil. Bewitching has both the attributes of light and darkness. Qing Devil narrowed his eyes. No matter how incredible this idea was, this was the only possibility left after eliminating all other possibilities. However, after hearing Qing Devil's words, Xiao Soa suddenly opened her eyes wide and exclaimed, "What did you say? Bewitching has both the attributes of light?" Her sharp voice was full of disbelief. Xiao Soa only felt that she had heard something impossible. Double attributes. Are you kidding me? Until now, she had never heard of such a thing. This sudden voice immediately attracted everyone's attention. They all turned to look at Xiao Soa, who was astonished, and Jun Lingxuan, who had a complicated expression. Finally, they turned their eyes to Bewitching, who was full of the light attribute. Because there were a lot of strange things that happened to Bewitching. Even if everyone felt that this was very strange, after not being able to find a result, everyone gave up on this idea. Now, after being reminded by Xiao Soa, they suddenly understood. Indeed, what Bewitching was practicing now was the light attribute. There was no doubt that Bewitching had the dark attribute. So many people had seen Bewitching's dark skills with their own eyes. And now all of this was true. Connecting the two together, it was possible that Bewitching had both the attributes of light. If it is a dual attribute, then it makes sense that Bewitching is able to cultivate here safely. Nangong Yuqing was shocked. He had never thought of such a possibility. However, when all of this was confirmed, he felt that it was too terrifying. Didn't this mean that Bewitching was much more talented than him? He was simply gifted with extraordinary talent. Dual attributes. No wonder the D family was so determined to make him the head of the family. No wonder Bailey Hongzhuang didn't find anything wrong with it. Chu Yingming murmured. At this moment, he felt that everything had an explanation. Why did Bewitching not care even though he was of the dark attribute? Because, to him who possessed two attributes at the same time, this was not a problem at all. I've never heard of a cultivator with dual attributes. Bewitching is truly a first-rate genius. Chen Feng stared blankly at Bewitching. In fact, he had also thought of this before. Since other dark attribute cultivators were unable to stay here, Bewitching was able to do it for a reason. However, when this thought was confirmed, he couldn't help but feel somewhat awkward. This was truly a case of talent. Since Bewitching was in such a situation, would it be the same for Hongzhuang? Previously, she had stayed at the Darkness Idol for a long time. Chapter 5933. Xiaofeng, is this true? Morong Jing hurriedly asked Di Xiaofeng after hearing the news. Di Xiaofeng was Bewitching's elder brother, so he must be very clear about the specific situation. Di Xiaofeng smiled faintly. Isn't it already obvious? This tacit admission also made Morong Jing and the others understand that Jun Lingxuan's guess was true. and they were all stunned. Oh my god, Beichen has awakened his attributes for a few years now, and you've been hiding this news all this time? Morong Jing found it hard to believe. He had been training with Beichen for so long, but he had never found out. Thinking about it, he was really slow. Jiang Wenyan took a deep breath and shook his head. I don't know what to say. Beichen is really too abnormal. Lin Qianqian and the others also sighed, but this was good news for them. The stronger Beichen was, the happier they would be. Xiao Soa didn't believe it at first, but after hearing Di Xiaofeng's affirmative answer, she understood that all this was true, and she suddenly sighed in her heart. Who would have thought that the real situation would be like this? With dual attributes and such a strong cultivation talent, as long as Di Beichen didn't die, his future achievements could be imagined. This was the man who had once been engaged to her. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but resent the Jun family. If the Jun family hadn't forcibly sent Beichen to the underworld, then she would have become a couple with Di Beichen, and Bailey Hongzhuang would have nothing to do with her. Fortunately, now there was Qing Devil. Qing Devil used to be so strong, so with a little more time, Qing Devil would definitely be stronger than Di Beichen. Her bright and beautiful eyes bloomed with strong brilliance. Even if she couldn't beat Bailey Hongzhuang, as long as Qing Devil could do it, the result would be the same. However, Xiao Sou, who was wishful thinking, ignored Qing Devil's own thoughts. When she found out in the future, she would truly regret it. Time passed slowly. When Di Beichen woke up from his meditative state, he found that everyone was looking at him strangely. He frowned and turned to look at Di Xiaofeng. Di Xiaofeng only smiled and shrugged, letting Di Beichen experience it himself. However, he soon understood what was going on because as soon as he woke up, the other cultivators began to discuss among themselves. The reason why he had kept the news a secret was because there had never been anyone with dual attributes. Furthermore, the threat of the Xiao family and the Jun family meant that his cultivation at that time wasn't high enough to hold his own. Now he was undoubtedly much stronger than before. Even if this news were to spread, there was no need to worry. On the contrary, this news would add more glory to the family. After a brief moment of confusion, Di Beichen turned his gaze to Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, she was still in a meditative state. Miraculously, her hands didn't stop moving, and she was still copying. Bailey Hongzhuang's handwriting was very beautiful. It was graceful and elegant just like her. Looking at the words was a pleasure. Di Beichen's smile unconsciously carried a trace of affection. Only then did he continue to copy the content on the wall. After copying some content, Xiao Sou found that she couldn't enter a meditative state at all. She immediately chose to give up. Chapter 5934. The other cultivators had the same reaction as Xiao Sou. Although the content seemed to be mysterious, they could not understand what it was. Because he didn't understand the language at all, it was very difficult to even copy it. As they watched the other cultivators cultivate, everyone gradually chose to give up as well. Even if they could break through one more level, it would be great. For the first time, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that she was so close to the true meaning of the light attribute, as if it was just at her fingertips. However, there was still a layer of invisible fog blocking her. During the time she was meditating, her understanding of the light attribute increased rapidly. This state was really amazing. Although it was not long, it was comparable to spending years, or even decades to gain more. When Bailey Hongzhuang came out of the meditative state, she finally understood Di Beichen's feeling. She had been in the same position for a long time, and her body was a little stiff. However, when she saw the content she had copied, she could not help but be surprised. I've already copied so much? Di Beichen smiled faintly. Your hand speed in this meditative state is much faster than usual. I even suspect that you don't know these ancient words. This was true. He realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's speed in copying was extremely fast after she entered the meditative state. Because these words were not familiar to them, they looked at the wall frequently in the process of copying. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang entered the meditative state, her speed was much faster than usual. Are you kidding me? Bailey Hongzhuang laughed involuntarily. I must have spent a lot of time in the meditative state. Bewitching raised his eyebrows slightly, and his lips curved into a charming smile. It was indeed a long time. How many days have we been here? 5 days. We have been here for a few days, but there hasn't been any movement. Is there some kind of mechanism here? Bailey Hongzhuang slightly frowned. Although there was a lot of content on the walls, she carefully looked at the content that she and Bewitching had copied. There was not much left. By the time they finished copying all the contents, it was time to look around. Bewitching looked around and said, "Indeed, we can give it a try. The situation in the Brilliance Shrine is different from the Darkness Shrine. I think the Azure Fiend is telling the truth when he said that this place needs to be tested." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "I think so too, but it's been a few days and there hasn't been an assessment yet. If it really exists, I'm afraid we'll have to find it ourselves." In fact, this was the case for most legacies. The Darkness Sanctuary was an exception. Suddenly, Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes. Then the aura of a breakthrough came. Boom! A sound attracted everyone's attention. The tyrannical aura caused everyone to be shocked. They could tell from Bailey Hongzhuang's state that she was breaking through. However, the last time they saw Bailey Hongzhuang, she was also at the Radiant Moon Realm like everyone else. After not seeing her for a while, she had already broken through to the Radiant Moon Realm? 6th Order Radiant Moon Realm. Second cousin-in-law's improvement in strength is too terrifying. Currently, there are only a few people who have broken through to the Radiant Moon Realm. Second cousin-in-law is already at the 6th Order Radiant Moon Realm? Chapter 5935. Jiang Wenyan shook his head. I originally thought that my cultivation speed was already pretty good, but compared to them, the difference is so huge that even I don't want to admit it. Morong Jingshan nodded in agreement and put a hand on Di Xiaofeng's shoulder. Xiaofeng, with such a sister-in-law, do you feel a lot of pressure? What pressure can I feel? Di Xiaofeng raised his eyebrows. If there is any pressure, it should be Beichen. However, according to the usual situation, Beichen's cultivation is probably not weaker than Hongzhuang. As soon as these words came out, Chen Feng and others paused slightly. After thinking carefully, they felt that what Di Xiaofeng said was very reasonable. Bailey Hongzhuang's breakthrough speed was terrifying. Was Di Beichen not terrifying? These two guys, breaking through was like playing around. I finally understand why second cousin-in-law said that even if she copied, it would not affect her cultivation. I haven't broken through until now, but second cousin-in-law has already broken through. Everyone looked at each other. Whether this was a blow to Linyi, it was also a blow to them. Another breakthrough sound came, and the rich light power wrapped Bailey Hongzhuang's whole body. Even Di Beichen, who was beside Bailey Hongzhuang, was surrounded. 7th Order Burning Moon. Bailey Hongzhuang broke through again. Everyone was shocked. The advantage of the Holy Lady of Light was completely displayed. The Light Temple itself was the home ground of the Holy Lady of Light. If Bailey Hongzhuang becoming the Holy Lady of Light was not much of a gap in everyone's eyes before, then at this moment, everyone had discovered the difference between them. Bailey Hongzhuang's breakthrough speed is so fast. Ordinary men are really under a lot of pressure when they are with her. Chu Yingming couldn't help but sigh. There was still a big gap in strength between him and Bailey Hongzhuang. But now, Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation had surpassed his. Nangong Yuqing's heart was also filled with a sour taste. Being defeated by a woman like this, one could imagine how he felt. In my opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang is no ordinary person. Even Di Beichen has been left behind by her. She didn't know where this Di Beichen's luck came from to marry such a beautiful woman. However, just when everyone felt that Di Beichen could not compare to Bailey Hongzhuang, the sound of a breakthrough suddenly came from the light cyclone. Boom! He had broken through. Just when everyone was sighing at how Bailey Hongzhuang had broken through 3 levels after gaining enlightenment, they suddenly felt that there was something wrong with the aura of the breakthrough. Why is the aura of this breakthrough suddenly so much stronger? Moreover, the scale has also increased. Something doesn't seem right. Nangong Yuqing frowned. What exactly was wrong? He couldn't put his finger on it. Chu Yingming nodded slightly. This aura, it's like breaking through to the heavenly moon stage. As soon as he said that, everyone was stunned. After sensing it carefully, they felt that it was really the aura of a breakthrough to the heavenly moon stage. Chen Feng and the rest exchanged glances before looking at the two people wrapped in the cyclone. A guess appeared in their minds. Bewitching's strength shouldn't be so abnormal, right? The corner of Lin Taxing's mouth twitched. It was obviously a question, but when he said it, he felt that it was the truth. Chapter 5936. No matter how much they didn't want to believe it, after sensing Bewitching's aura, they had no choice but to face the truth. Bewitching had already broken through to the Sky Moon stage. Among the many cultivators present, being able to break through to the Burning Moon stage was already very good. Now that a Sky Moon stage cultivator had suddenly appeared, it was truly unique. Nangong Yuqing silently closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. He had just said that Bewitching was no longer worthy of Bailey Hongzhuang, but in the blink of an eye, Bewitching had done it on purpose. If he had broken through earlier, he wouldn't have made such a joke out of himself. After Bewitching had entered a meditative state, the spirit energy in his body had continuously increased. However, breaking through from the Burning Moon stage to the Sky Moon stage required an enormous amount of spirit energy. When Bailey Hongzhuang had broken through, he had been enveloped by the rich light energy, allowing him to break through to the Sky Moon stage in one go. Feeling the aura of the Sky Moon stage, Bewitching's lips curled into a faint smile. His handsome face suddenly melted like snow, refreshing the heart. Everyone was silent. Other than envy, what else could they do? Bewitching, you've broken through to the Sky Moon stage? Bailey Hongzhuang's lustrous eyes were like stars, shining with a dazzling luster. Her delicate and beautiful face could not hide the thick joy. Bewitching smiled. It's all thanks to my wife. If it wasn't for this environment, it would have taken him a few more days to break through to the Sky Moon stage. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. This experience was probably the most fruitful one so far. Breaking through to the Sky Moon stage from the Nebula Stage 9. If it was any other time, it would have taken an unknown amount of time. Thinking about it, when they returned to see Zhongli Mu would also be surprised. Zhongli Mu was clearly younger than them, but his strength was so much stronger than theirs. It was really a blow to them. After the breakthrough, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching returned to their previous state and continued to copy. 2 days later, the two of them had already finished copying the contents of the scroll. After sorting it out, they kept it in their chaos rings. Compared with the two of them, Qing Devil was still copying. Xiao Soa didn't have the patience to copy these useless words. However, judging from Qing Devil's speed of copying, Bailey Hongzhuang believed that he really didn't know these words. If they knew each other, their copying speed would be extremely fast. However, his speed was not much faster than theirs. It seemed that it would not be easy for them to figure out what was written on these words. The two of them immediately stood up and began to search for the mechanism around the hall. They were very curious about the inheritance of the Temple of Light. After noticing their movements, Qing Devil quietly turned his gaze and glanced at them, before continuing with his own work. There was nothing on the white wall except for various words. When they were copying earlier, they had already looked at the situation on the wall. The smooth wall, cold to the touch, was like a jade stone with a bit of warmth. Even though there were so many words written on the wall, there was not the slightest bit of uneven feeling. In such a vast hall, where would the mechanism be located? After noticing their movements, Chen Feng couldn't help but ask, Bewitching, what are you looking for? Chapter 5937. Mechanism. Chen Feng raised his eyebrows. That's right, Bewitching replied. It's impossible that the Radiant Temple only wants everyone to stay here and cultivate. Hearing this, Chen Feng nodded slightly. Previously, everyone had been cultivating outside. Although the primordial qi in the Radiant Temple was denser, it did not make sense if this was the only purpose. Let's look around. We should be able to find it. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around. Although there seemed to be nothing, they might be able to find something if they looked carefully. Seeing this, Bai Li Yin Che and Ling also stopped cultivating and helped to search with Xiao He, Xiao Bai and Xiao Xuanzi. When the other cultivators saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others start to look for the mechanism, they were somewhat astonished. Could it be that there was really a mechanism in this hall? Bailey Hongzhuang carefully looked around, but she couldn't find the slightest clue on the extremely smooth walls. The entire hall was very big. Even if they searched all around, they would still need to spend a lot of time. Everyone spread out and searched the area. Suddenly, Bewitching raised his eyebrows and looked at the wall he touched with some surprise. This place seems to be a little different. As soon as he said this, everyone walked to Bewitching's side. Bailey Hongzhuang put her hand on it. Indeed, she felt that the wall here had a little more uneven feeling, which was different from the smoothness of other places. Could it be that this is where the mechanism is? Bailey Hongzhuang was somewhat astonished. However, no matter how she pressed her hand, there was no change. Although this place is a little different, could it be that the previous cultivators could not find the mechanism and used brute force to destroy it? Bai Li Yanche looked at the wall in front of him. He really could not think of a way to open it. What you said is also possible. Linga smiled. Bewitching looked at the wall in front of him and tried to integrate the power of light into it. After this attempt, his eyes lit up. There is indeed something wrong here. Everyone rushed over after noticing the change in Bewitching's expression. In fact, everyone's attention had already been drawn when Bewitching's group began to search for the mechanism. At this moment, after seeing that they had discovered something, everyone could not hold back the curiosity in their hearts. They simply put down their cultivation and walked over to Bewitching and the others. However, just as the crowd approached, they suddenly discovered that the originally unobstructed hall was emitting a dull sound. Everyone immediately looked towards the source of the sound. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that the wall behind them was gradually opening up, revealing what was behind it. I didn't expect this wall to be a door. There's actually something else behind it. Everyone was stunned. They had thought that the hall was big enough, but now it seemed that the hall was much bigger than they had imagined. There's actually a pool of water there. Everyone looked in front of them in surprise. It was an extremely wide pool, and it was filled with white mist. In this abnormally bright environment, it looked like a fairyland. Even though there was a certain distance, everyone could still feel the rich power of light there. For a moment, almost everyone approached the pool of water. Chapter 59:38. Bewitching nodded slightly and said, "Yes, this is not a difficult switch to turn on." It was not difficult to find the switch, which meant that the test might not be simple. Bailey Hongzhuang had also expected this. Thinking about what she had gone through in the darkness shrine, she still couldn't help but feel scared. She wondered if the situation in the brilliant shrine was the same. If it was no different from experiencing the feeling of being on the verge of death. After noticing the change in her expression, Bewitching guessed what she was thinking. He chuckled and said, "Don't worry, it might not be the same." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. She also felt that the pain was too terrifying. However, even if it was the same situation, she would be willing to experience it again, as long as she could improve herself. This kind of opportunity was something that most people could only wish for. "Ling Sun, let's go and take a look." Xiao So was a little depressed when she saw that Bewitching and the rest had discovered the mechanism. But at this moment, she was more curious about what kind of treasure the pool that had suddenly appeared was. Qing Devil also stopped copying when he saw this. To him, the contents on the wall were also extremely precious treasures. The records on the scrolls that he had seen before were not complete, but according to his judgment, the contents were extremely precious. On second thought, he thought that since the Statue of Light was so impressive, how could the things that appeared here be simple? Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the pool. The pool was extremely large, and there would be no problem even if all the cultivators present were to enter it. It was more like a lake than a pool. Everyone gathered outside the pool, and the dense fog drifted away, giving them a refreshing feeling. Standing in front of the pool, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of yearning. Just standing outside and feeling the dense fog made them feel refreshed. If they could enter the pool, the feeling would be even more obvious. However, no one dared to take the initiative to take that step. Everyone knew how dangerous the inheritance was on a daily basis. The more attractive a treasure looked, the more dangerous it was. If something went wrong after taking a step, no one dared to bear the consequences. At least for now, no one was willing to be the first to eat crabs. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen slowly came to the front of the pool, and everyone's eyes unconsciously fell on them. Ever since they opened the Light Palace, Di Beichen and Lin Li had unknowingly become the backbone of everyone. This pool of water is so clear. It looks like there's a very strong power inside. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the pool of water and felt a sense of yearning. Di Beichen looked at the pool of water, then slowly bent down and sensed it. There is indeed a very powerful force here. According to my judgment, there shouldn't be any danger. After going to the Darkness Shrine, he had gained a better understanding of darkness and light. Since the Temple of Light was a symbol of light, it was unlikely that they would do anything to take someone's life. These two statues seemed to be existences that could deliver all living beings from torment. Such a thing was obviously unlikely to happen. Di Xiaofeng looked around at everyone who was looking at Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang. He was speechless. These guys were completely treating his brother and sister-in-law as the leaders. Chapter 5939. Beichen, ignore them. We're not in a hurry anyway. Di Xiaofeng nudged Di Beichen with his arm, but he didn't hide his voice. Once this was said, everyone's expression became awkward. They didn't know how they knew about Di Beichen and Nangong Wuk. Most importantly, since they could open the door and find the mechanism here, they felt that they should be the ones to solve this problem. Nangong Yuqing's face turned red. He thought about how he usually looked down on Di Beichen, but now he was relying on Di Beichen. Seeing Di Xiaofeng's protective appearance, Di Beichen smiled. He originally didn't plan on testing the water. He never did this kind of business where he would suffer a loss. After hearing Di Xiaofeng's words, everyone was too embarrassed to count on Di Beichen and Nangong Wuk. They even withdrew their gazes. Looking at the pool filled with mist, it was like a delicious cake in everyone's eyes. However, they wanted to know if this cake was poisonous or not. After a while, a cultivator mustered up his courage and walked into the pool. After feeling the energy in the pool, the man couldn't help but exclaim, "Such dense spirit energy. Is there any problem?" "No problem." Everyone else couldn't help but walk into the pool after seeing that the man was safe and sound. For a moment, the sound of water splashing could be heard. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen also walked into the pool. Feeling the energy in the pool, they understood that cultivating here was faster than before. This kind of cultivation speed was faster than cultivating with high-grade spirit stones. It was simply heaven. Everyone's face was filled with joy. If they could cultivate here for a few years, who would be their match when they went out? Looking at the huge pool, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly took a few steps forward. The entire pool was square. Everyone had walked in from one side, so it was very crowded when they gathered together. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang, but the other cultivators also had the same idea. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen kept moving forward. In fact, they were also curious about what was on the other side of the pool. "Beichen, the purpose of the Temple of Light seems to be to help everyone cultivate. It doesn't feel like a test." Bailey Hongzhuang looked around. The pool water reminded her of the pool water in her master's inheritance. Similarly, it was filled with extremely dense essence energy. It was just that the energy here was slightly more abundant. This would be of great help to cultivators. It was just that they didn't know where the assessment point was. Di Beichen's eyes were deep as she pondered. Perhaps the test is on the other side of the pool. At this moment, Di Beichen glanced around and suddenly saw a line of words written on the wall of the pool to his right. "Look, there are words written there." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately turned her eyes. As expected, the words were very grand and revealed a kind of elegance and carefreeness. It was a pity that they couldn't understand the meaning of the ancient words at all. There are indeed hints. Unfortunately, we can't understand it. Bailey Hongzhuang spread out her hands. It seemed that they could only feel it for themselves. Just as the two of them were moving forward slowly, the discussion of the cultivators behind them entered their ears. Chapter 59:40. I also noticed that the further we go, the more difficult it is. What's going on? Could it be that this is a test? Do we need to go to the front? Everyone guessed. The cultivators who were originally at the edge also began to walk forward after hearing this. Although they didn't know the purpose of the pool, since there was resistance, it was obvious that the further they went, the better it was. However, after hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen in confusion. Beichen, do you feel resistance? I don't feel anything different. Me too. Bailey Hongzhuang felt strange. Everyone doesn't seem to be lying. This is interesting. Not long after, Di Xiaofeng also walked to the two inside. The further you go, the greater the pressure. I see that the two of you look very relaxed. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other and didn't say that they didn't feel any pressure. It's okay. Di Beichen smiled faintly. I feel that if we go to the other side of the pool, there might be different gains. Also, did you guys notice that the further we go, the denser the origin energy? Di Xiaofeng's eyes were filled with excitement. If we can reach the front, the cultivation speed there will be faster than here. Indeed. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. As they moved forward, the feeling of the origin energy gradually becoming denser was very obvious. Did you guys notice that there are actually lines at the bottom of the pool? Di Beichen looked at the bottom of the pool. The water was very clear, and he could easily see the bottom of the pool. He vaguely noticed that there were thin lines at the bottom of the pool. Although they weren't very obvious, he could still notice them if he looked closely. Di Xiaofeng was startled for a moment before looking at the bottom of the pool. His eyes were filled with surprise. Indeed, these lines aren't very obvious and almost merged into the pool. If you don't pay attention, you would think that they are ripples in the pool. What is the use of these thin threads? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and subconsciously looked at the words on the wall of the pool. If it wasn't for the fact that they didn't recognize them, they wouldn't have to keep guessing like this. I don't know, Di Beichen said in a low voice. Let's keep moving forward. We'll find out eventually. Lin Taxing and the others also noticed this from the conversation between the three of them. They felt that the pool was not only used for cultivation, but also had other uses. Almost everyone was moving forward with all their might, wanting to get ahead of the others and find out what was going on. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen also felt the resistance in the water after moving forward for a while. However, this resistance was not difficult for them, and they could still move forward steadily. Compared to how easy it was for the two of them, some of the cultivators behind them were already showing signs of strain. Every step forward seemed to be extremely difficult for them. The resistance is too great. It's so difficult to move forward. Really? I think it's okay. It doesn't seem to be as strenuous as you. Are you serious? You've already walked so much farther than me. Everyone was talking, and in the process, they found that everyone's situation was different. Chapter 59:41. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look behind her. Di Xiaofeng, Lin Taxing, and the others were still moving forward steadily, while some cultivators from the family clans had already widened the gap. From the unconcealed expressions on their faces, it could be seen that they actually wanted to catch up with everyone. But the increasingly strenuous feeling made them feel very helpless. Although we don't know what this is, let's keep moving forward and see how far we can go. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen with a smile. Her eyes curved slightly with the smile on her face, as bright as the crescent moon, bright and dazzling. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was obviously interested, Di Beichen's lips also curled into a smile, and he smiled dotingly. Okay. The two no longer hesitated and walked forward with all their strength. Bai Li Yanche and Ling were also unwilling to fall behind. They followed closely behind Di Beichen and moved forward. After seeing how interesting the situation was, Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and Xiao Xuanzi also walked into the pool after seeing how interesting the situation was. Of course, With Xiao He and Xiao Bai's usual appearance, they would undoubtedly be submerged under the pool if they entered. The two little fellows immediately changed their figures and became the same size as Xiao Xuanzi. Only then did they continue to stride forward. Everyone who was originally moving forward with difficulty was shocked when they saw the sudden change of Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's two contract beasts could be said to be very famous, but they never knew that these two guys could change their figures at will. This was too strange, wasn't it? Everyone was stunned. Although contract beasts were not the same species as humans, they would grow stronger with age, and their bodies would also grow bigger. However, contract beasts that could change their sizes at will were really rare. These two people are already very abnormal on normal days, and now even their contract beasts are so abnormal. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. The more they understood, the more they realized how big the gap was, which made them feel extremely helpless. Nangong Yuqing looked at Di Beichen with a complicated expression. When they first met, he didn't put Di Beichen in his eyes at all. Now Di Beichen had become an existence that everyone had to face. This guy's strength had increased terrifyingly. The Di family's heavenly physique truly lives up to its reputation. Chu Yingming sighed with emotion. The Di family had stood in the upper realm for so many years, so everyone had some understanding of the heavenly physique. Even if a cultivator with the heavenly physique appeared in the Di family would appear every time, this cultivator was an extremely powerful existence. If not for this, the Jun family would not have deliberately kidnapped Di Beichen when he was still in his swaddling clothes. She just didn't expect that one day, Di Beichen would actually come back. Following Chu Yingming's words, everyone nodded. The heavenly physique was publicly known to be extremely suitable for cultivation. Once a cultivator had the heavenly physique, their cultivation speed would far surpass ordinary cultivators. Thinking about the changes Di Beichen had undergone in the past few years, everyone understood. Now he was the only heavenly moon cultivator among them. Perhaps in the future, he would leave them far behind. A portion of the cultivators who had reached the middle of the pool were unable to go any further. It was as if there was a terrifying resistance preventing them from moving forward. It was just a single step, but they couldn't cross it. I can't go any further. Why is that? Chapter 59-42. When the cultivators who were moving forward noticed that some of the cultivators were forced to stop, they found it very interesting. A sense of superiority arose in their hearts for no reason. At least, although they were under a lot of pressure, they could still move forward. Bailey Hongzhuang felt more and more resistance, and her steps became extremely slow. This feeling reminded her of the time when she climbed the stairway to heaven. It was the same feeling. Every step forward was extremely difficult, but in the end, there would be unimaginable gains. She couldn't help but think of her master, father, and others. It had been a while since she came out to train. She wondered if everyone was doing well. With how hard the seniors worked, they must have been in closed-door cultivation. Her father and master were rare geniuses. If they didn't encounter so many things back then, they would have already come to the upper realm, and even gained a foothold. Although it was a bit late now, it was a good thing that cultivators had a long lifespan, and they still had a lot of time. A warm smile bloomed on Bailey Hongzhuang's lips. When she thought of her family, her expression was always gentle. When she first transmigrated, she was alone. But now, she looked at the familiar faces beside her. Everything was so beautiful. Compared to this happiness, the hardships and tribulations of training and fighting were nothing. I can't move forward anymore. Di Xiaofeng looked at where he was standing. Although he didn't want to admit it, the huge resistance clearly told him that it was impossible to move forward. In the process of moving forward, he clearly found a problem. That was that the horizontal lines clearly had a distinguishing effect. Although the pressure within the horizontal lines increased, it was still within a range that could be crossed. However, every time he crossed a horizontal line, the resistance would greatly increase. This feeling, it was like these horizontal lines were specially used to distinguish the difference. Every time he crossed a horizontal line, he would be separated by a level. When this thought appeared, he increasingly felt that all of this was real. Xiaofeng, you've already walked quite far. I can't move anymore. Lin Qianqian looked helplessly at Di Xiaofeng. At least Di Xiaofeng's position was a bit ahead of her. She stopped at this position and couldn't move forward anymore. Hearing this, Di Xiaofeng noticed Lin Qianqian behind him. Taking a closer look, he found that Lin Qianqian was one space behind him. I can't move either. Lin Taxing frowned. Although there was still a bit of unwillingness in his eyes, he had to admit that he really couldn't move forward. Di Xiaofeng looked again and found that Lin Taxing was in the same space as him, but slightly behind him. After Di Xiaofeng and the others couldn't move forward, most of the other cultivators stopped in the area behind Di Xiaofeng. Nangong Yuqing and Chuing Ming were in the same place. Jiang Wenyan, Morong Jing, Shangguan Yingying, and Wen Ziren were in the same place. Although they were slightly, of course, they were all in the same area. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.